Hello and welcome to part 3 of the Lockdown Coder. Lockdown in Sydney in July 2021. Well, today I'm suffering from the effects of my first Pfizer vaccine. So I'm all kind of flu and shivery. So I've got a cup of tea to help me for the next 10 minutes. So if you remember yesterday, we talked about simple data types and we got onto lists, and you learned that lists are basically done in JavaScript with arrays. Most programs, and they're pretty easy, really. Pretty much all of them. Also learned that. Certainly all the business ones you'll ever write will just be manipulation of lists. So today we continue the theme and we're going to talk about objects. Now, the interesting thing about objects is that objects can be complex and objects can be simple. So I'm just trying to find a slide I did here. Remember, this is live and unscripted, and I really haven't got a clue what I'm going to say apart from the theme, much like Dave Allen in the 1970s when he did his comedy, but he was way better than me. So, objects. I'm sure I had a slide on objects. Just bear with me for a second. Okay, here we go. So what is an object? An object is a thing. You know, I've asked that question many times in many lessons to many students. And really, an object is just a thing. So anything you can see around you. And think of a game, because we're coding games. Really, we're coding games this term. And when we teach, we generally code games. So everything on the screen is an object in a game. Now look at this. A toaster. A toaster is quite a simple object. Okay. An even simpler one would be a chair that doesn't really do anything, but it's still an object. A complex object would be the space shuttle. Retired from service now, I know, but still complex. And believe it or not, you could model both of these things in JavaScript or any programming language, probably, or some data language, because they're made up of objects and objects within objects within objects. So let's, without further ado, show you what an object is in JavaScript. Now, the simplest object in JavaScript is this, which is quite ridiculous, isn't it? So that's kind of an empty object. That's like a nothing object. I can't think of an equivalent for that, but it's kind of a nothing object. If I drop down the arrow, remember when you hit enter, sometimes if it's a complex object, JavaScript or the console will give you a little arrow to the left. You can click down, get some more information, and it tells you it's an object. So I remember the type of thing we did yesterday in JavaScript. You can find out what the type of something is. I'm going to do this. Yeah. So type of squiggly brackets, or braces as we call them in the business, is object. Okay. So let's try and model an object in JavaScript. Remember, we've got our info selected here, info only, so we're not getting messages come up here. So we're going to create a variable. I keep on talking about variables, but I haven't really told you what they are yet properly. Tomorrow. So we're going to create a variable called my Tarago. Okay. And there are lots of ways of creating an object, but we're going to stick to kind of the simplest. So I'm going to make this an empty object. Okay. So my Tarago is basically my car, which I got back recently from an accident. Someone went into the back of it when my wife was driving, and it could have been written off, but it wasn't. So fortunately we got it back, and very fortunately, because we want to convert it into a camper van for van life later on when the kids leave home. So if I hit enter here, I've literally got an empty object. Remember that undefined? We're just setting a value here. We're setting the variable my Tarago to an empty object. So if you looked in a container, the container would have a label on it which said my Tarago. That's the name of the container. If you looked inside it, you'd find an empty object, and I've no idea what that would look like. And we're not returning anything from the console log function, so it gives us undefined, which I've always found really annoying, but there you go. So what does a Tarago have? A Tarago has a name, which is Tarago, I guess. Well, let's just say make. So with objects, you use what we call the dot notation to access the properties, the information about the object. Okay, so we would go dot. Remember, this is empty, right? So we have to create the properties right now, so we can then have a useful object, and then someone else can go, hey, let's have a look at this car object, and can inspect our car object and look at it and see all these wonderful properties and things that it does. So we're going to give it a make equals Toyota using a string. Hit enter. Now your Tarago, or my Tarago, has a make property, so we could read that back. Let's do it. Go my, remember it's in memory, so Chrome will already find it. You just hit right arrow or tab and hit enter. You don't even need to hit enter because it's already given us the answer. Make Toyota. And our squiggly brackets now have something in. So it's no longer an empty object. It is an object with a single property called make, whose value is Toyota. Drop it down. Not that useful yet, dropping it down, because it's only got one thing in it. Let's add a few more. So my Tarago dot year equals 2005. Just keep that as a number. Why not? Got to live dangerously. My Tarago dot model equals GLX, I think. My Tarago dot color, British color, equals champagne, not gold, champagne, because there are actually gold Taragos out there which look different. But my Tarago dot engine size equals, I don't even know, 2.4. We're going to assume it's liters, right? But I can't put 2.4 L because I'd have to make it a string then, right? 2.4 L is not a number, so let's just say 2.4. What else? What else does a Tarago have? Number of seats. My Tarago dot num seats. I'm gonna teach you something in a sec. Equals 8. Something a bit unrelated but related. Okay, you know I keep writing sort of a mixture of lowercase and uppercase, like I did for engine size and num seats. That's called camel case. There you go. camel case. Thank you, JavaScript. Camel case is what we use in JavaScript when we're defining variables, words, all kinds of things, and it basically is constructed by if your variable contains a couple words or more, the first word is in lowercase, and each subsequent word is capitalized on the first letter. So a kind of ridiculous one would be, let's create a variable, var my Tarago at my house in my drive. That's camel case. See, each subsequent word is capitalizing the first letter. And if you're creating variables in JavaScript, use camel case. Okay, good. All right, so let's read this back. Let's clear the screen. And when you clear the screen, you're not clearing the variable out of memory. It's still in memory. So if you type my, it will come up. Just time check. Oh no, I'm over. Okay, this is just how we're going to read this back, and that's it. Sorry. So my Tarago, hit enter, because you're asking it. When you do this, you're saying, what is my Tarago JavaScript? And it says, it's that. And you say, oh, is it? Let's drop down the arrow because I can't read it all. And then you say, wow, it's an object with color, engine size, make, model, num seats, year. So can you see that if you constructed a player, an enemy ship, a power up, a bit of scenery, a box, a weapon in a game, you'd want to create an object with properties. Like your player would have all kinds of things like speed, name, size, health, score. And every object would have too. So that is objects in JavaScript. Pretty simple, and it's definitely not the only way of doing it. You can do things in many ways in JavaScript. Not that we necessarily would be covering it here, but believe me, I've done every which way under the sun many times in various roles, jobs. So thank you. This has been the Lockdown Coder in Sydney 2021. Stay safe, and remember, 10 minutes a day keeps the bugs away.